new parents look at successful families and successful parents, and they just want to copy them, and so they try to do the things that they think that they did to get their family so smart and good and whatever, which is really just can be a really bad mistake of correlation causality. So like, you're gonna take your kid to, you know, every Mommy and Me music class, and you're gonna take them to the museum and start looking at all the Greek and Roman sculptures, and you probably already were playing Mozart in the womb and things just to get the brain really stimulated. And it turns out that as best as we can tell from looking at data of actual parents and children along these dimensions, that none of that stuff really matters. It just doesn't make your child better, smarter. It might make you happier, might even make them happier, might also make them miserable. But it turns out that those are not causal elements.
I always said, you can teach a kid just as much at the grocery store as you can in a museum, maybe more. My entire academic life has been devoted to figuring out tricky ways to get at causality, because the world doesn't just offer you up causality. Okay, what you see in the world is correlation. What the world gives you is things are moving together or they aren't. But to be useful, you need to dive down to be able to strip away what's causing what, what's not causing what. The data that we've looked at suggests that by the time you actually have a kid, most of the choices you make that will make you a good parent, you've already made them.
So if you go to the store and buy 10 parenting books, it's probably not gonna really help the kid that much, but the fact that you're the kind of person who, as a parent, cares enough to go buy 10 parenting books, even if you don't read them, that probably means you're a pretty good parent. It's just don't think that the books are gonna have a magic effect.
Ah, parents. We want to believe so much that everything we do is going to make a difference in our children's lives. What they eat, where they go to school, who they hang out with. But before any of that takes place, parents are confronted with the one single ominous decision that could shape the entirety of their children's future. What is going to be their name? These days, there's an entire industry devoted to naming your baby. And business is booming. There's magazines, books, websites. There's even high-profile baby naming experts.
I'm a baby name expert. I study names, I ask parents how they choose names for their children, and I look at how names are changing, because baby names are changing today faster than ever before.
Names are important because they have a lot to do with your family, your heritage.
If a name represents you, you know what I mean? Street credibility, all of that.
Names are definitely a big part of meeting someone.
A name can make you popular and a legend.
Without a name, you're nobody. You gotta have a name. It tells your whole identity.
But just how important can names really be? I mean, unless it's Rockefeller or Gates, can your name have some sort of magical power over your entire destiny?
Ooh, the name fairy.
Not convinced? Well, what about the following story? Once upon a time, there was a young mother who thought she was naming her daughter after her favorite actress on The Cosby Show, the smart and fiery Tempest Bledsoe.
This is the most humiliating moment of my entire life, and there have been many.
But having never seen the way it was spelled, the young mother mistakenly named her newborn daughter Temptress. Well, little Miss Temptress didn't have an easy time growing up.
What? I don't even know if that's what you mean.
As a teenager, she became sexually promiscuous, got into a whole bunch of trouble.
Back here, you little shit! That's right, I better not catch you!
And ended up in court.
All rise!
Leaving the judge to ask her mother,
is young Temptress just living up to the expectations of her name?
was that one little misplaced T and R all that stood between a life of ease and huxtable success versus those long, hard days in court and juvie? Harvard professor Dr. Roland Fryer was determined to find out just that.
What happened to Temptress has nothing to do with her name, has everything to do with where she grew up.
It turns out Temptress grew up in a poor black neighborhood, the kind of neighborhood Dr. Fryer's been studying for years. As a world-renowned economist and a leading expert on race in America, Fryer has long been interested in what he calls cultural segregation, the gap between white culture and black culture.
One embodiment of that culture is what you name your kid. It's probably one of the few cultural items that we can really measure precisely. What we did was we looked at the effects of your kid's first name on their life outcomes.
Dr. Fryer analyzed the naming records of every baby born in the state of California over the last 40 years, and those names tell an unmistakable story. African American parents are more likely than any other ethnic group to give their children unique names.
There is definitely a distinction between names for white people and names for black people.
Black names be like Malik, Jaquan, Nashawn, Naheem,
Tasha and Shamika.
Shaniquas and the Nashons and the Kayshons.
I know this girl, her name is Treasure, T-R-E-Z-U-R-E. Struck me as typically, more African-American name.
I like the names that begin with S-H-A, like Shaheem, Shahid, Shamar,
Shaquem, Shakur. Oprah is popular.
It was actually in the 50s and the early 60s that we saw huge overlaps in the naming patterns of blacks and whites. So people, naming their kids John, Michael, names like that. And what you saw was around in the 1968 or so, kind of in the Black Power movement, actually, you saw distinct bifurcation with black names getting more distinctively black, and a lot of them were Islamic names because the Black Power movement was about identity. Who are we? Who are you? Are you part of us? It wasn't until the late 80s and 90s that we started to get, kind of the made-up, concatenated names that you see now.
This generation today, they sort of changed the whole name concept. They have names that are 30 letters long, and...
Now, everybody try to do something, unique. They try to name their kid over something different,
We had 228 unique versions of the name Unique. Again, my favorite was U-N-E-Q-Q-E-E. Another one of my favorites was U-N-E-E-K. So there are a lot of people are trying to be unique.
So what happens to all these uniquely named kids? Kids like poor little Temptress.
I think it's not the name that's doing the damage to Temptress. It's that they grow up in the type of situation where someone would name their kid Temptress. The person who actually would name their kid that probably has a host of other issues that are influencing that kid's lifetime outcomes, not just the name itself.
What kinds of issues? Well, let's look at a boy with the study's most common white name and a boy with the study's most common African-American name.
The person who gives their kid a distinctively black name, on average, is more likely to live in poverty and to be kind of on the lower rungs of the socioeconomic ladder.
You see, this is where Jake lives, and this is where Deshaun lives.
In Deshaun's neighborhood, the schools are not functioning. The teachers in those schools aren't the same quality as would be in Jake's neighborhood. In those neighborhoods, 80% of the households are female-headed only. And what we found is that names don't matter so much. The type of mother you have, the type of family you have, the type of community you grow up in, those things matter a lot. But what they name you just doesn't matter.
So a name doesn't define your destiny?
Maybe if you name someone Destiny, I don't know. But no, I mean, your name doesn't define your destiny.
A name may not define your destiny, but it can dictate the way other people perceive you. Meet Harvard professor Dr. Sindel Malainathan.
I'm very familiar with Roland Fryer's work. We both worked on the impact of names. I think Roland has emphasized that the people who choose names that are very black are different from the people who choose names that are not very black. Whereas we've emphasized that, holding everything else constant, the people who end up with very black names are treated very differently. We know that in the data, African Americans earn a lot less. And we're interested in how much of that earning less is simply because they find it harder to get a job. And are African Americans treated very differently in the labor market than whites?
Dr. Malainathan conducted his own study, this time in Boston and Chicago.
What we did is we made up 5,000 resumes. Half of them we put an African American name, half of them we put a white name. Otherwise, the resumes were the same. And we sent them out. And then we said, which got called back more? And what we found was that the same resume, when it had an African American name, was about 33% less likely to get an interview than when it had a white name. It means that if a white person is searching for a job for 10 weeks, an equivalently skilled African American person would be searching for 15 weeks. And those are 5 long weeks if you're unemployed.
You can judge somebody by their name. It's not right, but people do it.
They assume that just because your name is Monique or your name is Lavon or Shaniqua, that you're African American and you're not qualified because your name has an ethnicity to it.
One time there was a girl named Lakeisha. I talked on the phone, and I thought she was black, but when I met her, I was totally shocked that she was a white Southern girl.
When I picture Roshanda, yeah, she's black.
The names we used in our study were names like Lakeisha, Jamal, Tyrone. Based on our results, it raises a question. I'm an African-American parent. I'm thinking of naming my child. Tyrone sounds like a very good name. I might have had a grandfather named Tyrone. Should I name my child Tyrone? Yes, naming your kid Tyrone, you have made it harder for them in the labor market. On the other hand, should you give in to that? Should I give in to the prevailing norms, or should I express my individuality as I want? It's a bit of an ethical quandary.
My friend's got a drug dealer named Tyrone that I assume is a black guy.
Todd is a white name. Tyrone is a black name. I mean, that's sort of how it goes, right?
You might choose a distinctly black name as a way to signal something about yourself and about your commitment to the black community. And that's a way to show other African Americans, look, I am really black. And I think the fact that there are distinctly black names already tells you that there is a cultural divide at some core, visible, noticeable level. And we see it sometimes in clothing, we see it in names. And in fact, it's true, there are quite a few distinctively white names like Emily, Brendan. I'm forgetting what those, if you give me a minute, I can come up with the others.
White names is like Sarah, Megan,
Maria, Mary,
Billy, Becky's, John's,
Tad, Joe, Mike,
Ryan, Sam,
Chester.
My brother and I were talking about how we had pretty white-sounding names. He's Abner, I'm Harper. Stone Phillips. Look, that's like perfectly suited for a white guy. This is the best white guy name you could have.
We live in different cultures, and your name is largely determined by your culture. And the difference in the incidence of Lakeisha amongst African Americans versus whites might be a good way to understand how truly there are different cultures that African Americans inhabit and whites inhabit.
Today, there's more evidence than ever that the culture we come from influences the names we choose. Just ask the baby naming expert.
More and more today, you see parents choosing a name almost as if they're launching a product, that you're trying to position your child for the best chance of success in a global marketplace.
So in an oversaturated marketplace, which names garner the most attention? Are some names destined for the top shelf while others are headed for the bargain basement? Let's take a look at two different product lines. Turns out there is such a thing as a knockoff name. The top 5 middle-class white girl names from Fryer's study are, in order of popularity, Ashley, Lauren, Jessica, Emily, and Sarah. While the top 5 lower-income white girl names are Brittany, Samantha, Amanda, Jessica, and Ashley. So what's happened to Ashley? She's fast losing her popularity on the middle-class list, but she's #1 among the Walmart crowd. As those wealthier folks see their names popping up everywhere, they quickly discard them in favor of less common merchandise. And just like that, today's high-end Ashley becomes tomorrow's low-rent Trashley. Think about it. Would John Wayne have been as tough if his name was Marion Morrison? Would we think Marilyn Monroe was as beautiful if her name was still Norma Jean? And would we think of Ice Cube rocking the crowd if his name was still O'Shea Jackson?
Actually, I always wanted to change my name to Max Powers, because it seems like a name that everybody, like, once they hear it, they're like, dang, this guy must be really cool.
I wanted to change my name when I was younger. I never liked it.
If my name was Henry Obama, you know what I mean? I think that would mean something to people, and I would have more doors open for me.
I did want to change it, but now I'm sort of cool with it. It just sort of like jumps on your back and rides along with you through life, you know?
As much as you may hate your name, at least your dad isn't this guy. Meet Robert Lane. He had 2 sons. He named his first son Winner. 3 years later, he named his next son Loser. So Winner and Loser Lane set off in the world to claim their destinies. And what happened? Well, Loser went to prep school on a scholarship, graduated from college, joined the NYPD, and eventually became a detective and then a sergeant. He goes by Lou now. And his brother? Well, the most noteworthy achievement of Winner Lane is the sheer length of his criminal record. Nearly 3 dozen arrests for burglary, domestic violence, trespassing, and other mayhem.
Is there
one name that you can give a kid that will guarantee they won't become a screw up?
No. Sorry, there is not one name that you can give a kid to guarantee they won't become a screw-up, and there is not one name that you could give a kid to guarantee that they'll actually be a success. You know, it is a crapshoot when it comes to names.
I don't think there's any name that can guarantee success, at least none that we found. You know, the world is full of excellent people and terrible people with all sorts of names, but the vast majority of the reasons people choose is left unexplained. It's like, why did you choose your child's name? Sounded nice.
Who really knows what parents are thinking when they choose a name? Maybe your parents went with something traditional, or something bohemian, something unique, or something perfectly trendy. And maybe your parents didn't have the best taste and you can't stand your name, or maybe they got it just right.
Actually, my name means intelligent hero, so that describes me to the fullest.
I was actually named after a horse. My dad's a horse trainer.
My middle name is Comfort because an angel of the Lord came down to my mother and told her she was going to have a daughter with dark hair and blue eyes who would be a great comfort to her.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was the last seal of all the prophets.
My name says that I'm named after my grandfather, who was named after his great-grandfather. That's what it says.
In the end, most parents just want the best for their children. And if they believe a particular name can give their kid that extra edge, then why not? I mean, who knows? It just might work.